So we've got to decide to be laser focused on those key things, keeping Canadian sensitive data safe with sovereign infrastructure that Aidan just talked about and Carrie's talked about, and I've talked about, core to our mission, privacy, data, kids, consumers. That's a huge part of it. That allows a big open window for innovation still, but for Canadians to feel safe. This is a high-tech world. Legislation has to move the same way that technology evolves, which is iteratively, right? Like, we've got to be nimble in how we focus, because, you know, it is pointless to try to throw a saddle on a horse that's bucking and running. Like, we got to make sure we can do it and control what people want us to control. And by the way, we can.
The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
Welcome to the Amber Mac Show. Coming up in today's episode, we have a conversation with Canada's Minister of AI about why this new government is all in on artificial intelligence. And speaking of AI, we share how this technology is working to keep Indigenous languages alive, thanks to an exciting project started right here at home.
And south of the border, we unpack why Elon Musk is accusing OpenAI of stealing secrets. And just in case you didn't get enough Musk, we've got the latest on DOGE fallout, including data privacy concerns and having to beg fired workers to come back. Lots to talk about as usual, Amber, so let's get right into the headlines.
Newsfeed.
Jeff, last week you talked about the Federal Trade Commission suing Ticketmaster for not enforcing its own rules for bots and other questionable activities. That was all in the last week's TheOtherMac. And this week, just 3 days into the trial for the FTC's lawsuit against Amazon, the e-commerce giant reached a $2.5 billion settlement, including a $1 billion fine going to the FTC and $1.5 billion that will be used to refund an estimated 35 million affected customers. These are a lot of numbers here. The FTC's original complaint reads, Amazon used manipulative, coercive, and deceptive user interface designs known as dark patterns to trick consumers into enrolling and automatically renewing Prime subscriptions. So, Jeff, let's unpack a little bit more about what Amazon has been doing here.
Yeah, so the core thing is it's comparatively easy to sign up for Amazon Prime. It only requires 2 clicks, I believe. But to cancel it, there are only 2 ways that you would be able to cancel. One, directly contacting customer service, which can be an arduous process as we've all gone through. Or 2, navigating a 4-page, 16-click, 15-option cancellation process that Amazon referred to internally as the Iliad flow, named after Homer's epic story, which is, you know, a very long and arduous read. So it seems that Amazon definitely knew what it was doing here.
We should also note that this process started under the Biden administration in mid-2023 and is only now going to court. We should add as well that in the meantime, Amazon has greatly simplified and improved the cancellation process. This is good news. But it is, however, another example of a big tech company not doing what's right until they are threatened with legal action. We talk about this time and time again. And now, speaking of bad companies and lawsuits, Elon Musk's xAI is suing OpenAI yet again.
Yeah, as if the states wasn't litigious enough in the past, it seems like we're in a whole new world for that now, with the president repeatedly threatening to sue everyone who doesn't like him. And fellow bullies like Elon Musk have launched lots of what look like pretty frivolous lawsuits as well. This time, Musk's lawsuit alleges that OpenAI has been hiring former xAI employees in order to steal secrets related to Musk's Grok chatbot. Now, having had some experience with ChatGPT and Grok and having followed both closely in the news and as we've reported on it, you got to ask yourself, does OpenAI really have anything to learn from Musk's racist chatbot? So maybe we'll see after this makes it to court, if it ever does get to court.
Yeah, I think Grok has had so many issues that we have reported on the show, and Musk's damaging legacy continues through DOGE. We haven't talked a lot about DOGE lately, but a new report claims that a database containing social security numbers, birth dates and places, parents' names, and more was put on an insecure cloud server, despite the Social Security Administration having issued a risk assessment that this could be catastrophic, with one whistleblower claiming that a worst-case scenario could see social security numbers having to be reissued, Jeff, to every single American.
Yeah,
Also,
that's nuts.
Turns out that hundreds of employees fired by the DOGE team were recently rehired because the cuts many months ago apparently went too far.
Yeah, and such wasted effort and so much damage and stress. It's just totally pathetic, really. And other concerning news related to AI, we've talked about the ludicrous amounts of money being spent on AI in the States. Well, now Deutsche Bank has warned that the scale is so enormous that AI spending alone may be propping up the entire U.S. economy, writing that, quote, in the absence of tech-related spending, the U.S. would be close to or in a recession this year. That warning was also raised by the Wall Street Journal earlier this year when they noted that AI capital expenditures grew the economy more than the entirety of consumer spending had at that point.
This is so concerning. The problem is that there's no telling if these investments are actually going to show the level of returns they need to in order to really justify all of this spending that we're seeing, which more and more people, I think, are starting to really flag as being increasingly unlikely. Now, Jeff, we've talked about this before, but welcome, if you haven't realized it before, to the AI bubble.
No doubt. And let's hop over to Europe for what I sure think is some good news, and I think other people will too. We've all seen the very annoying pop-ups asking you to consent to cookies every single time you visit a website. But it looks like the EU may finally be considering altering their e-privacy directive that they put in place in 2009. That required this in Europe and which was adopted by most of the world because you didn't want to build different websites for non-Europeans or have something totally different. So instead of having some complicated system to account for European visitors, the whole world got endless amounts of pop-ups.
Yeah, and this has basically led to so many people who are simply giving consent to these endless pop-ups out of the way, which is certainly not accomplishing what is intended or what it intended. And it looks like we'll hear more about the next steps for this from the European Commission in December. Now, speaking of things that probably don't accomplish what they're intended for, Meta has rolled out its new teen accounts for Facebook and Messenger globally.
And it's just another example of tech companies refusing to do what's right until someone essentially puts a gun to their heads. Now, these teen accounts were first released on Instagram. And even though they've had that background, a former senior engineer at Meta who became a whistleblower has said that the Instagram teen accounts are woefully ineffective, saying that Meta's safety tools are mostly, I quote, ineffective, unmaintained, quietly changed, or removed. And in his research on Instagram from just a couple months ago, he determined that of the 47 safety tools available, 30 of them could be circumvented with just a few minutes effort, if that.
But Jeff, at least you can contact someone at Facebook or Instagram if you need help. Oh, wait, no, you can't. That is impossible. You'll never be able to do that. Now, let's jump from one questionable social media network to another, as it looks like we're finally getting closer to the much delayed American TikTok deal, with Trump signing an executive order approving a deal valuing TikTok's U.S. operations at $14 billion. It should be noted that China has yet to say whether it will approve the sale. So this is really an ongoing story, which leaves TikTok's Chinese owner ByteDance with a stake of less than 20%.
Yeah, and that's compared to U.S. companies having roughly a 2/3 share, which includes investors like Larry Ellison's Oracle, Rupert Murdoch's Fox, and Michael Dell, while the Abu Dhabi royal family will have a 15% share as well as a seat on the board. But the sketchiest thing about all of this is Trump is once again extracting money from the deal with an alleged request for a payment to the U.S. government of several $billions to let this go through. As Luigi Zingales, University of Chicago professor of finance, noted, quote, at a minimum, this now means there's a tax imposed on every major business transaction. But even worse, businesses will no longer be focused on innovating and creating value. And instead, the whole game is now rent seeking. It's all about ingratiating yourself with Trump. Yeah. And we've seen far too much of that lately, as some of the biggest players in the country built on independence and courage and open markets tuck their collective tails between their legs to come to heel for a bullying president, further entrenching the harmful crony capitalism that seems to be taking over the United States.
Jeff, tell us how you really feel. I will say, I'm going to predict something. I don't like to do this, but the Trump family is going to be the richest family in the world if Trump ever leaves office. I think he's going to overtake Elon at this rate. Truly bizarre. Anyway, to close out the news this week, Spotify has just announced that it will be updating its AI policy to help reduce spam, prevent unauthorized voice clones, and otherwise make it clear when AI has been used to create music. Jeff's going to tell you a little bit more about that and why he thinks AI labeling needs to be widely adopted. That's coming up next in The Other Mac.
The Other Mac.
Spotify has just announced a new set of policies to help deal with AI-generated content, including banning deepfakes and AI impersonations. Part of this is an effort to combat AI slop, and Spotify says it has removed over 75 million tracks in the past year that it thinks qualifies. But to be clear, they aren't banning AI music, and frankly, they're not even reliably requiring it to be labeled. And Spotify is not the organization I'd trust to do this in any case, as they have engaged in so many shady practices over the years that I just refuse to use their streaming platform. Do a quick Google search into that if you want to see some examples, but I don't have time to go into them now because what I really want to talk about is AI labeling in general. Part of the problem is that there are lots of ways to use AI when creating something, some of them legitimate and some of them not. A great musical example is the Beatles' Now and Then track that used AI to rescue and reconstitute John Lennon's voice from an old demo tape. And in fact, the wonderful Beatles Get Back documentary just wouldn't have had the same impact without its generous use of AI to improve sound and image quality. But at the other end of the spectrum, there are abominations like the fake band The Velvet Sundown that I covered in a previous The Other Mac, who are entirely AI generated and also terrible. Two things that go together more often than not. The streaming platform Deezer has actually developed a tool to detect AI music, and they found around 20% of the songs uploaded to their platform, almost 30,000 tracks a day, were AI generated, and that much of it was essentially audio spam. So this is definitely becoming a problem. Another example, if you watch much YouTube, you've probably noticed how many videos seem to be partially or maybe even entirely put together with AI. And this doesn't necessarily mean AI images and video. Rather, in a lot of cases, it's what sounds like AI-generated scripts read by AI voices over non-AI video that's been poorly cobbled together by AI from a variety of sources. I noticed this with an increasing amount of travel videos and music videos especially, one recent example being a great rock band's YouTube video that pronounced the band INXS's name as INXS, then INXS, and then some weird amalgam of the two, which is something that no human is ever going to do, or certainly not in the space of a minute at least. YouTube has admitted that it's used AI to alter people's videos without telling them, and has brought generative AI features to its creator tools, all the while claiming it's working on weeding out AI slop. And while YouTube requires generative AI content to be labeled, it doesn't seem to do much of anything to enforce that rule, like far too many rules we have around these days. But YouTube is not alone. Meta just launched a new Vibes feed in the Meta AI app that is entirely and intentionally all AI generated videos, something I just can't understand the value proposition for. So what can we do about this? Unfortunately, it's pretty difficult to reliably identify some types of AI content. And as noted above, it can be a bit of a continuum where using an AI tool at one particular stage of your creative process may or may not contribute to the slop. So it's hard to tell where to draw the line. Realistically, the sleazy creators who profit off AI slop, and frankly, the platforms that let them, don't have any real impetus to change their current behavior. So the only workable solution I can see is maybe something like community notes in X, where platforms essentially crowdsource AI content identification. This would be far from perfect, but something needs to be done, and soon, because it won't be before too long that many people just don't care anymore because they've become completely desensitized to it. And that's just what the makers and the platforms that embrace AI slop are hoping for. I'm the other Mac. Let's keep it real out there, eh?
At the beautiful Ned Hotel in New York City, I moderated a panel conversation with a team of experts about Zenny's IQ Lens with Zenny ID Guard, which is an all-in-one solution designed to defend your vision and your privacy. Beyond the range of stylish frame options, I was especially impressed with the infrared protection that shields your face from near-infrared light, which is used in facial recognition systems. The pink sheen means your lens is working for your privacy. Zenny makes this advanced technology affordable and accessible to everyone. Thank you so much, Zenny, for this next-level all-in-one lens for indoor and outdoor use.
The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
At a recent AI event in Montreal called All In, Amber sat down with Canada's Minister of AI, Evan Solomon, Cohere's co-founder and CEO, Aidan Gomez, and NVIDIA's VP of Generative AI Software for Enterprise, Carrie Ann Brisky, to talk about the AI opportunity in front of us right now and how Canada can step up to meet the moment.
AI Spotlight.
Minister Solomon, I'm sure you want a break from speaking, but I am going to ask the first question to you. So really great to understand Canada's plans for the future of AI. One question I wanted to ask you, I think it's fair to say that everybody in this room is all in, but we also know when it comes to Canadians that more than half of Canadians in this country are worried about the future of AI. Like you mentioned, they're worried about their jobs, they're worried about their kids using AI, they don't have trust in AI. What do we do to potentially solve that very critical issue?
Well, good to be back. That was the shortest break ever. First of all, great to see Amber and Carrie and Aidan and I speak a lot, and trust is so key. Look, we have the AI Canadian Safety Institute. Later today, you can hear from Joshua Bengio and Law Zero. So there's lots of initiatives, but the first and foremost thing, there's a legal side. I mean, it's a priority for us to update our privacy and data laws because people have to feel secure. And those are 25 years old, and they deal with data flow, and they deal with things like consumers and deep fakes. So we have a role to play on the legislative side, not just as a signal to people, but as a signal to businesses. That's the first thing, and that's not the only. There's other aspects. The Justice Minister, I should just say, my colleague Sean Fraser, has spoken just the other day about using the criminal code as well for certain kind of violations that relate to kids. So look, people recognize there are new vectors of threats and they need our legislation to keep up. So that's one side. The second side is understanding. Amber and I have known each other for a long time, and when you see waves of technology, they always come with anxiety. And this is not from Amber's age, but more my age, during the Gutenberg printing press. But the first printing press, the first modern printing press was the Aldine printing press in Venice. And after Gutenberg invents it, people are starting to make books, and they didn't have copyright laws, and there's a lot of anxiety that the cathedrals of memory would collapse. And they did, by the way. And the Aldine printing press had their logo, their colophon was the anchor and the dolphin. And their Latin motto, for those of you who still speak Latin, was Festima Lente, which means make haste slowly. Make haste slowly. That's what we have to do. We got to move quickly to keep up, but we got to make haste slowly. That means talking about AI and understanding it as a service. And Aidan and I talk about this a lot. It is a tool. And Carrie talks, when people talk about data centers, NVIDIA talks about data factories, AI factories that produce something called a token. That may not be clear what that is for everybody across the country. But again, when we built railroads and roads, the towns sprung up around them. And so we've got to talk about this first as a service. How will this make people's lives better on health, on agriculture, on the things that they see, touch, and feel? Then we have to celebrate the entrepreneurs who have the tools to create new jobs that have not been imagined. And then we have to make sure people do it secure. And that's part of our job. And we can't just talk to people at conferences like this. We've got to talk to everybody to let them know, like in any technical revolution, anxiety comes and comfort comes over use case and a feeling of trust.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely a lot of anxiety. Carrie, one of the things the minister said in his speech was that sovereignty does not mean solitude. And I think that was a really good point. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the work that NVIDIA does. I was listening to a podcast interview that you did earlier this year, where you said that nations were some of the first movers when it comes to AI and understanding the value of AI infrastructure. Can you talk a little bit further about that?
Yeah, I think that all nations should develop their own AI instead of just solely outsourcing it to an external provider. And the reason is simple. It's because AI needs to be aligned to your local values. It needs to understand your cultural context, your norms and your policies. It needs to speak and write in your nuanced natural language patterns. And so it's not something that can be your digital intelligence is not something that can be outsourced. And, about 4 years ago, I actually was moderating a panel with AI Sweden, and they had built the first Scandinavian LLM. And, nobody cares more about the Swedish culture and the Swedish language than Sweden. And since then, we've worked with the Sarvan model in India had 10 Indic languages, and then Swallow model in Japan, and on and on and on, Speaklish in Poland, and Domain in Italy, and my good friend Arthur Mensch is going to come out here and talk about Mistral in France. And I think the point is these model builders recognize it starts with the local model, but that's not the end of it. Right? What needs to happen, and the thing that we're trying to talk about, is that the local model will attract developers. And so when developers start to build, they need infrastructure to build and to build these applications. And then when they're building these applications, then people interact with them, and then that creates more data, and they give explicit feedback. And so then you're able to, again, create trust through transparency and use, and that little by little. And then you are able to take that data and then improve the model. And so it gets better over time. And so I think that's what's really important.
I'm going to come back to you on this, but Aidan, I wanted to go to you next in terms of Canada and Canada's role. You have been a huge champion for this country, even wearing Canadian plaid today, so thank you for that. You also recently posted on X, and yes, I'm still on Twitter, that Canada is the best country in the world. The experience of services it provides its citizens should be the best in the world, too. Can you talk about the partnership with the Canadian government to enhance public services with secure, sovereign AI tech?
Yeah, I think what we're doing with the government, our intention is to do what we're doing with the private sector, which is just make the quality of products, in this case, the services that the government offers to the citizens, much higher, while also making that delivery dramatically more efficient. So our priorities are, when you're a Canadian and you need something from your government, it should be easier, faster, and better to get that done. It shouldn't be complicated. So we want to drive that, and then we also want that to be efficient, effective. We want each person inside an organization to be dramatically more productive, and at the same time, doing what the minister and Carrie have said, which is preserving sovereignty. So ensuring that our data isn't going into the wrong hands so that it's vulnerable to being used against us, and ensuring that Canadian data stays in Canadian data centers and with Canadian companies. So that's the objective, and I think we're making good strides towards that.
Aidan, the minister talked a little bit about the timing. It is a very exciting time right now. Can you comment on that a little bit about why now is the right time to do this in Canada?
I think there's an opportunity where like the minister was saying in the opening remarks, Canada led on the development of this technology. We were the first ones to invest in the research when no one else believed in it. There was Jeff, there was Joshua, and our government, our public institutions, research institutions took a bet on deep learning that almost no one else was willing to make. And that led to where we are today. We're in this sort of magical moment where computers have woken up and we can speak to silicon. We can speak to some glass and metal. That's a surreal moment, and Canada delivered that to the world. But we should also be the ones to actually commercialize it. We shouldn't just do the research part and then hand it away to the rest of the world to make money on it and actually put it into production inside the world's economies. We should be the ones to do that. And in order for us to succeed in delivering that to the world, we have to be our own first customer. And so I've seen in this moment in Canada, there's a lot of geopolitical changes that are happening. Canadians are stepping up. The ambition, the willingness to invest and take risk, which 2 years ago I didn't see, right? Like 99-point-something% of our revenue was outside of Canada. Now, this year, it really feels like both public and private sector have woken up.
Yeah, I think I interviewed you a couple of years ago, and we were still in kind of those early days and a lot of apprehension. Minister Solomon, I wanted to talk about innovation, but more specifically regulation. This is a massive topic right now in the minds of so many people. When we think about trust and safety, it is true that these are really values that Canada has today. We are a trusted country. When you think about the future of regulation, as so many countries in the world move away from regulating AI, is there an opportunity for Canada to play a really important role here, all while we also innovate as well?
Absolutely. First of all, just to echo what Aidan said, and Carrie, digital sovereignty is a core policy issue. And again, as you said, Amber, it's not solitude, but there is a moment, and you're seeing at Cohere great new partnerships with Canadian companies, not just with the government, Canadian investors, which is great. That's happening. There's a whole bunch of companies watching us they say, okay, how do I unlock some of that capital so I can stay here? Where's my seed investor? What about Series A? Where's my VCs? Again, we are very aware of that element of the backbone, that kind of vertebrae. And we are very, very focused in the days to come and the Prime Minister's been clear about this in our platform, unlocking access to make sure that entrepreneurs have better access to capital at that level, and then right up the chain. On the regulatory side, first of all, we need some clear lines because uncertainty freezes capital investment. And there's a lot of uncertainty around the world. What can we do here? Maybe 10 seconds on the landscape. The United States and China, they have a position that any form of regulation is a constraint on security and innovation. And then the EU a couple years ago went ahead and they tried to regulate, and they have found, and they're quite open about it, that it's done some good things, but it's constrained a lot of innovation. And Canada, I really feel that I get all the kind of crappy, boring technical stuff here, and these guys do the cool stuff. But I'm just going to say, in our last parliament, there was a piece of legislation on privacy and data called C27, wake up, C27, but it was about privacy data, and there was a third element of it that was going to regulate AI, and it was very, very controversial. And so what I have said publicly in our legislative priority is I am very keen on part 1 and 2 because we desperately need an update to protect our privacy and our data, especially how data flows across borders. Especially then we need to add, we have to be present. We got to meet people where they're at. And where they're at is like, I don't want to see deep fakes. I want to make sure if someone does a deep fake, or if Amber, there's a deep fake of you on there saying something, what can you do about it? So that kind of thing is real, and we got to look at that. So we're going to try to address that. We got to address sensitive information around children. And you hear stories about this all the time. So we've got to meet people, but that's the first part of the legislative journey. Now, can we, William, tell this and pick off the apple on the head on the perfect regulation? No, because we don't know. There's no way right now to perfect way to regulate AI that allows for perfect innovation. And so we have to be really careful. So we've got to decide to be laser focused on those key things, keeping Canadian sensitive data safe, with sovereign infrastructure that Aidan just talked about and Carrie's talked about, and I've talked about, core to our mission, privacy, data, kids, consumers. That's a huge part of it. That allows a big open window for innovation still, but for Canadians to feel safe. This is a high-tech world. Legislation can't move, has to move the same way that technology evolves, which is iteratively, right? Like, we've got to be nimble in how we focus, because, you know, it is pointless to try to throw a saddle on a horse that's bucking and running. Like, we got to make sure we can do it and control what people want us to control. And by the way, we can, but we got to make sure we don't miss this innovation train. And I think we're going to strike that balance. And the key is to be transparent about it, and not to promise a regulatory fantasy that Canada, because Canada can do things alone and be digitally sovereign, but we're a trading nation. We have more free trade relationships than any other country in the world. Our competitive asset is that people want to do business here, and we want to do business with the world. We can't constrain our number one competitive asset: rule of law, educated population, great talent churning out, trusted place, natural resources. Those are our competitive advantages, and we have to make sure in protecting those, our regulation doesn't suffocate those.
Since you're throwing out a lot of old sayings, I will also add, you know, we can't let perfect be the enemy of good. You know, perhaps we need good regulation. It's not going to be perfect yet. Aidan,
it could be perfectly good, though. Right?
That is fair.
That's what we hope.
Yeah, perfectly good. I would be happy with that. Aidan, in line with this conversation on trust and safety, you speak a lot about the importance of security as well. You wrote recently, "We don't treat security as a feature, it's the foundation." Can you expand on that?
Yeah, so Cohere's deployment model is quite different from some of the other players in our space. We do fully private deployments, so that means we can go into any data center on any cloud or off of cloud. And we can go all the way to air-gapped, where you unplug that data center from the internet and it's completely secure. There's no other organization in the AI space who's delivering this technology, these agents, that securely. And so that's something that we're super proud of, we view as a huge differentiator. And it's the ultimate guarantee in protection of your data. There's so much fear that whether you're in the private sector and it's your trade secrets, your IP, your employees are uploading this into ChatGPT or consumer services, and then it leaks to some external company that might train on that data, and then it becomes public information. Whereas with Cohere, there's no sending data externally. You aren't sending your data to Cohere. Cohere is sending our models and our tech to you, and you run it in your data center. So that guarantee of security is something that people have been previously lax about, and now are taking seriously. There's this renewed urgency towards privacy, towards sovereignty, where we understand how valuable data is, how sensitive it is, and that we actually need to protect it.
Carrie, when you look at what Cohere is doing with the Canadian government, it's a great example of alignment and collaboration. I know NVIDIA has been doing this for a long time in terms of collaborating. Most recently, there was an announcement that NVIDIA is helping to build the UK's AI industrial revolution. What can you tell us about the importance of this investment?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to take a second and congratulate Canada and Cohere on supporting sovereign AI and sovereign models on local infrastructure. I mean, I think that's fantastic. Yeah, the UK announcement. So we had announced that a number of NVIDIA AI infrastructure partners are going to deploy 120,000 GPUs. That's 11 billion UK pounds of AI infrastructure. And additionally, there was Jensen mentioned a $2 billion investment fund with local capital investment firms. And the point is, I don't think it's really about the announcement. The point is really the takeaway is when you have world-class universities and researchers, which you have here, and startups, which you have here in Canada, and capital investment firms, when you bring that all together, you can and have them rally around a national infrastructure. I mean, it just lays the foundation for innovation. And so it really does take, it's not just about the infrastructure, it takes all the developers, it takes the entire ecosystem. You have to come together to build it together.
We just have a few minutes left, so a couple more questions for our panel today. Minister Solomon, I wanted to ask about Canadian business leaders, because this is a question I think a lot of them have. I do a lot of speaking on this topic, and I always get asked the question, what can I do as a business leader today to adapt to this AI journey and integrate AI into my business? What would your advice be for people who want to be proactive right now?
I would say three things, Amber. First, buy Canadian. To a certain extent, you got to use our Canadian partners. We have great companies here. Second, there's going to be great innovators like NVIDIA that are international partners, and those partnerships matter, and they'll work with you within your own sense of safety and security. So that's the first thing. There's great innovation here. Even our international partners and the greatest innovators around the world are working together because they appreciate the need to build the ecosystem here. That's the first thing. The second thing is have a plan. Adopting technology for the sake of the technology is not the plan. Adopting technology for the sake of the service delivery is the plan. Clear metrics and clear customer change. So you've got to have clear metrics. And the partners, the good partners in this technology, and you're seeing them here, and you're probably seeing them all through this entire All-In conference, and there's many, will help partner on that. Look, investing, a lot of CEOs, in Canada, we have a low adoption rate. Now it's changing, it's changing almost by the day. The curve is bending up. But we are about 8 to 10% in adoption rate behind the rest of the OECD in terms of AI usage. So that's a productivity issue. That's a competitive issue, okay? And investing in R&D and investing in solutions to drive not just efficiency, but productivity is really important. But the best partners will help design a bespoke system that delivers the service. So I would just say, first, look around here, right? There's lots of great Canadian companies. 2, invite your international partners to join that plan. And 3, have a good strategic plan to adopt. And finally, this is something in government that we got to avoid, pilot-itis, right? We don't want pilots that die. Again, in the business of technology, when you iterate, you adapt and you grow. You adapt and you grow. You don't have to be, and Amber, you said it, and I think Jensen Huang, I was with Jensen at a dinner recently, and he said, he was talking to some people, he said, the problem with all of you people, and everyone kind of held their breath, he said, is that you're too perfect. You wait till everything's perfect. In our business, you've got to launch and see and test and then keep growing. And so don't be afraid to get a little mucky on this.
Absolutely.
Aidan, maybe I could ask you to follow up to that. So buy Canadian, have a plan, partner. What else would you say to Canadian business leaders?
Yeah, no, I just want to echo what Minister Solomon said, which is that ambition and risk tolerance, which is something that Canadian organizations have lacked historically. Actually leaning in, taking a bet, not being satisfied with just doing endless little POCs, science experiments, but also not being satisfied with, if your AI strategy is, I bought Microsoft Copilot or my employees use ChatGPT, you don't have an AI strategy. That is not a strategy. That is like the absolute bottom of the stack in terms of value creation. And so you need a strategy, you need actual concrete objectives and a path towards true ROI.
All right, well, we just have 2 minutes left. I want to just get some closing remarks from each of our panelists today. Carrie, starting with you, just some advice for the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would double down on just get started today. And what AI has been is it closes the technology divide. It's been closing that gap. And if you haven't already, or if your family hasn't already, or your business hasn't already, there's so many amazing applications because you can go out, and Aiden said it earlier, you can go out and you can just talk to your computer. I mean, the amount of people that can talk to your computer is vastly greater than the amount of people who know how to program in C++ or Python. And I'll say that my 12-year-old daughter went out and there's apps, and she created an application to track her gymnastics scores and have AI evaluate her and speak, and just by talking to it. And the thing was, you can see the code, so trust through transparency. You could see all that code being written for her. And I felt like an old grandma. I was like, Daddy and I used to have to write all of that code by hand. And she was not impressed.
Yes, just like the days of the printing press.
But go do it. Just go out. There's so many great apps to just get started today.
Aiden, you've already given us lots of great advice. Some final words from you.
Yeah, no, I think this is Canada's moment to take this technology from the research phase, which I was a part of. I grew up in Ontario. I went to U of T. It's where I met my co-founders. We now have the opportunity to take this research that we invested in, we took the risk, we bet on, and developed for the world, and put it into production. And to do that, we're going to have to be ambitious, we're going to have to take risks, and we're going to have to lead. And so I think that's for everyone in this room, every single citizen inside of Canada to think about. What does that mean, and what can I be doing to push that forward inside of my organization or my day-to-day life? There's a huge opportunity in front of us. We just need to choose to seize it.
Minister, we're almost out of time, but just a few seconds from you for closing remarks.
First of all, thank you, and continue the work. Canada's moment for sure, if we're ambitious and we take the right bets. Bet on each other, I would say. But the foundational message to me is people. Like, don't pit the technology against people. This is a tool for entrepreneurs and a tool for better service. And if we show people that, you will find this room doubling, and I know it will because the Scale AI people are awesome. It will grow and grow and grow. We want people to crowd into this space because this is a service tool to make our lives better. And that's the most important thing in this. Really, we're in a crisis. This is a helpful tool to grow our country and our economy for everyone.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Montreal.
Thank you to the All In organizers for making this recording available for our show. And speaking of AI in Canada, coming up next, we share how this technology is helping to save Indigenous languages that are at risk of going extinct.
You're listening to The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
It's estimated that one Indigenous language dies every 2 weeks. In our next segment, Amber talks about how technology like AI can help.
Talking Tech.
September 30th is National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. The orange shirt that Canadians wear on this day symbolizes the loss of culture, freedom, and self-esteem among Indigenous children who were lost in the residential school system. There is so much more that we can all do here in Canada to learn about Indigenous peoples. One of the topics I've been reading up on is how technology can help. That's when I stumbled upon some work that's happening at Mila, which is a research institute in Montreal that was founded by Joshua Bengio. Mila has many incredible initiatives on the go, but one that caught my eye is called the First Languages AI Reality, also called FLAIR. As the group explains on their site, more than 50% of the world's languages will become extinct or seriously endangered by 2100. The majority of the languages that are under threat are Indigenous languages. More than 4,000 languages are spoken by Indigenous peoples worldwide, who represent less than 6% of the global population. It is estimated that one Indigenous language dies every 2 weeks. Michael Running Wolf is the FLAIR co-founder and lead architect. In a recent TED Talk, he shared more about his vision for the project.
Our languages define our heritage and our relationship to our land and our relationship to our people as a community. It was in my mother's tongue that I would be rocked to sleep so that I would dream of wuku, rabbit. I believe The future is engaging language technology that recreates communities of cultural practice and works holistically with indigenous ways of knowing. Most importantly, I believe we need conversational AI technology that will ease a language learner into educating themselves about a language they are ashamed and embarrassed to not know.
Running Wolf is one of a growing number of people working on solving this problem. Earlier this year, Ontario Tech University students pitched a similar generative AI project to preserve Indigenous languages. I contacted one of the students working on this idea to hear her story.
Hello, my name is Anupriya Dubey and I recently graduated from Ontario Tech University. Earlier this year, I participated in a team competition called Design for Change, where this year's prompt was using AI to make education accessible. To tackle this prompt, my team and I designed Eduline, a design solution we proposed based on the idea that education should be accessible to people anywhere, even in regions with limited internet access. As part of the design proposal, we also explored how a proposal could help preserve Indigenous languages while making this knowledge accessible to learn. One of the reasons we pitched Eduline as a proposal was the fact that we firmly believe that education should be accessible to everyone, everywhere, and that through technology, we can make knowledge accessible while preserving it and also making the learning process personalized.
Anupriya graduated in June of 2025 from Ontario Tech University's Computer Science program. Her work, along with the team at Flair, is critically important. As the conversation reported earlier this year, Canada's Commission for Indigenous Languages shows that no Indigenous language in Canada is safe and that all are in various stages of endangerment. The article goes on to explain that most AI chatbots are trained on the English language, which leaves other languages in the dust. As Canada pushes forward with its plans for AI sovereignty, Indigenous data sovereignty is also something to keep in mind. Artificial intelligence can play an important role to make this happen, which reinforces that Canada's AI vision must include everyone at the table and not just a few tech leaders at the top. To learn more about the history of Indigenous peoples in Canada and reconciliation, there are plenty of places to go online, including the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation at nctr.ca. Coming up next week on the Amber Max Show, Jeff and I have talked a lot about chatbot safety and social media safety for kids. That's why we are so excited to have the director of the Tech Transparency Project on the show. Katie Paul is joining us for a deep dive on what the research says about how companies like Meta are harming our kids. Here's a sneak peek and lots more to come in the next episode.
We did some really basic tests in a report that just came out looking at Meta explicitly says that it doesn't allow fight content to be pushed to teens under a certain age. And we found there's huge loopholes in that. And not only was our teen account that we created, which was keyed to have less of the sensitive content pushed to it, not only was that teen account receiving graphic fight content, but content that went so far as dog and animal fighting, dogs ripping each other's throat out, something that would be traumatizing for anybody, let alone a teenager. And Meta has not only failed to fill these gaps, in response to the Washington Post, their changes actually made it worse, and the protections we had given them credit for in the report have been removed. And this is just another example of where we see the kind of failures on what are supposed to be their teen accounts, their safer versions of this content. In response to the assassination of Charlie Kirk, obviously there was a very widespread, extremely graphic video of the incident that was all over social media. So we used that same teen account in the midst of this crisis to check and see if that content was accessible to the teen, because Meta says it makes sure that graphic content is blocked or hidden from view. And time and again, we saw that very graphic video being pushed to this teen account.
Hey, it's Amber Mack, and I just wanted to remind you that every Tuesday I send out a weekly newsletter that is entirely free. You can sign up over at ambermack.com/newsletter. Each week I talk about the latest in technology, social media, consumer tech, and the list goes on and on. I also like to start each newsletter with a short essay. This is an example of the essay from this past issue. It's been said by many that the most successful people in the world know how to prioritize signal versus noise. This is not a new idea, but a popular mental model that helps all of us separate priorities from distractions. I subscribe to this way of working, especially in today's nonstop information landscape. And since this past week we saw Apple's biggest day of the year, its annual iPhone launch event, it's worth noting that the late Steve Jobs also followed this framework. As one of Jobs' colleagues recently shared in a video that has now gone viral, Jobs would focus on 3 to 5 things every day that he absolutely had to get done. Most other things were distractions dressed up as opportunities. Now, not all of us have the luxury of being able to focus on just 3 to 5 big things a day. But if you really think about what has to get done when you wake up every morning, it certainly simplifies life if you can write down these absolutes and give yourself some grace to let the other stuff wait if needed. Over the years, I've done this in spades. I often joke that it's like my own personal tunnel vision. As someone who grew up in a family that loved harness racing, I've always thought of this focus like the horses with their blinders on, focused only on the track ahead. I can also say with certainty that living in the social media age really amplifies all of this noise out there. I fall into this trap at times, finding myself watching videos of AI-generated babies speaking like adults, which are actually pretty funny, or scrolling endlessly into the dark corners of online comment sections. For now, I can quickly withdraw from those spaces, but I know it's not easy for everyone, especially as dopamine-inducing algorithms tap into our brains to keep us hooked. I could go on and on about this topic, but I want to be part of the signal in your life, not the noise. So this is just a brief reminder that in the chaos of today's information world, sometimes a piece of paper, a pen, and a list of priorities really are the best medicine. We have about 10,000 people in our community so far, and it is such a wonderful process to write this newsletter as well as hear from all of you. So once again, if you haven't had a chance to subscribe, want you to head on over to ambermac.com/newsletter. Again, it's entirely free and it will land in your inbox every single Tuesday. Thank you again for listening to The Amber Mac Show, and thank you for signing up for my newsletter. Have a great day.
You're listening to The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.